that much interested in poetry as an art to serve rather than poetry as a tool to, like Irving Layton says, oh, I am nature's mouth. As its mouth I serve, right? Or he said, he said something about poetry being freedom. I forget some famous line of Irving's, right? Say, bullshit, Irving. You serve poetry, right? It's older than you, it's bigger than you, it's smarter than you, it's been around a lot longer, and it's going to be around a lot longer after you're gone. So don't say.
Did you ever say bullshit, Irving, to Irving Layton?
My wife did. She also did it to Richler one time. We were at a big party. Richard had come back from England. He had this big house that he always wanted to have, a big stone house up on the mountain. And he had this big party, and Angela went up to him and said, Clark Blaze isn't here. Didn't you invite Clark Blaze? And he said, no, why should I? And she said, I think so. He writes better than you do. I would never have. But she could get away with that because they would, then he followed her around for the rest of the night.
So there are a bunch of threads that I want to follow up on from things you've just said, and coming back to this group of younger Montreal poets against, or in relation to the West Coast. But let's go back to the story about Patchen and your experience in university and seeing poetry performed, and let's talk a little bit about Warren Tallman and the poets that he brought in, Duncan in particular, I guess, who I think probably made
He didn't bring them, we brought it.
Oh, you brought it. Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about the function of readings, right, in your education of this kind of poetics that was so important to you?
It's really funny that I was an English, I was a history major, but in grad school I became an English major. And it was so lucky, just lucky. And I think this happens all through history, that there's just lucky things happen to bring people together, and people happen to be at the right place at the right age and so forth, right? And this was certainly my experience, because the people I went down to, I went down at a certain time to UBC, and also so did Fred Waugh and Gladys Highmarch and Lionel Kearns, etc., right? Daphne Moore, that's it. Most of us came from little dicky towns and came there to go to university, and eventually we some of us met some of it. I met Lionel first and so forth, and I met Gladys maybe second, and then there was Warren Tallman, and his wife was Ellen. It was very important. Warren went to university on the GI Bill, or whatever it's called. So he did his, I can't remember which order he did them in, but he did one of his graduate degrees in Conrad and the other one in Henry James. What? But he met Ellen Tallman while he was at university, and she was from the Bay Area. Warren's from Washington. And she grew up knowing the poets that eventually showed up in the anthology, right? And she introduced Warren to these writers, right? And the possibility of these writers and so forth. And then the whole San Francisco scene with the printers and etc., anthologists, etc. And he just went, he became like the Kerouac guy, the Creevy guy, the Wilson guy, etc., right? And he was so enthusiastic, skinny little chain-smoking, chain-drinking guy curled up in the corner of his couch, right, with his fingers going the wrong way and everything, like Warren, right, with his little balding head and his little glasses. And he never said Warren, he always said Warren and Ellen, right? She was like big. She wasn't when she was little, but like, so. It's wonderful. So he was teaching, and she was like most of the women at UBC being taken advantage of, and they got to teach a couple of first year courses and were sessionals, right? Same thing happened with Phyllis Webb, same thing Jane Rule, right? these wonderful people, and they got, that's what happened to them, but they were teaching. And people, somehow or another, Gladys, Warren gave a class, 429, American Literature, Poetry. No, it was just called Poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And I never enrolled in it. Everybody else enrolled in it but me. I sat in occasionally, right? But Gladys was one of the first ones, and she wasn't even a poet, she was a prose writer. She wound up becoming their babysitter and then living at their place. And then things just grew, right? And we kept finding out about Warren and so forth. Eventually we did things like this. It comes time we're in graduate school, and we want to do a course, and we would like the course to be not the one that's offered, but what do you call those courses where you do one-on-one with your teacher?
Yeah, like a directed study.
Yeah, directed studies course. So we wanted a course, several of us decided each of us wanted to do a directed studies course on Ezra Pound and Charles Olson. And each of us would like Warren Tolman to be our advisor. Well, seeing as how there were like 8 of us, and we all wanted to do the same directed reading course with the same guy, why not do them at the same time at his house? Get a credit for it, right? Wonderful, right? I can still remember Fred Waugh, who was a music major. He did one on the music and the candles, right? That was, God. See what I mean? So lucky, just lucky to be there at that time with these people and that. Then so up comes Robert Duncan. It's amazing. He was more famous in Vancouver than he was in New York. And this was common with Jack Spicer and so forth. So we're just like, he's a god for us, he's nobody for everybody else in the English department. They never heard of him, they don't know who he is, right? Or whatever across the country. But that's part of the way it was in San Francisco. They didn't care of New York. They wouldn't care about that.
Right.
Like they had they publish a small book in an edition of 350. They had 350 people to read it in the Bay Area. They didn't care what was going on in New York, right? And that happened all the time. So do you think we could get Duncan to come up here? Well, says Warren, he would have to, get his travel paid for. So we brought him up on the bus. That's like 1,000 miles.
Yeah, that's a serious trip.
Yeah.
And he did it.
Yeah, I did. It's like a 24-hour trip on the I became, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How long did he stay for? Do you remember? Or did he just
long enough that Ellen Tolman did a series of interviews with him on CBC. He gave us classes for a week or something like that. Okay. We were sitting there reading his poems like crazy. Right. And unless you heard Duncan talking, you wouldn't know what it was like. But you just, God, we never heard anybody talk like that before in our lives, or spin off the names of people we have to read. Right? Amazing. He came up a couple times, and then this became, somehow or another, Warren managed to snuffle his way through the English department and find some money to bring other people up. So then other poets from the San Francisco area would come up, and there's sort of this Vancouver, San Francisco thing that's always been there,
right? And
in music and everything, and we just got to hear these wonderful guys, and then that culminated in the 1963 summer school of poetry, right? Christ. Will I go to Charles Olson's class this afternoon, or should I go to Allen Ginsberg's class? Oh, God.
So how much, when you came to Montreal, was your involvement in the series about bringing that model, right, of readings to Montreal?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's pretty much,
yeah. I thought, these are the guys, right?
Yeah.
So I come here, and because I'm the poet in residence, I have to do a poetry class, right? In the poetry class, are Artie Gold and Dwight Gardner. I'm thinking, oh shit, and here I am, I come to Montreal. These people, so far during the time I've been here, nobody knows the names of all these people I keep talking about all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So I go into that and I think, that's too bad, man. then I find out that these two guys, Artie, who grew up here, and Dwight, who grew up in Alberta,